Hello, good afternoon. Michael Wynn, Chief Digital Officer of Digital Ops, Division of RB Oppenheim Associates. Welcome to the Digital Marketing Podcast and video, where we talk about digital marketing strategies and tactics to help grow your business. Today, I want to explore the 7 attention-grabbing components of a compelling digital narrative. I think today we all have to agree that this is just one gigantic game of attention. If we can get our target audience's attention, we win. Plain and simple. So, what are these 7 attention grabbing components? Well, I think first of all, we have to start off with an inspirational moment, a moment in time where you are connecting with, remember that time when, or remember what it made me feel like when, right? Like that moment that you had, and I know, I can think of a bunch of times. Here's a really interesting moment. Yesterday I was watching in between a couple of the NFL games. I happened to catch an episode of Shark Tank, and in the episode, the the person who is trying to lure the shark tanks into investing in their business, the sharks asked, where did this idea come from? And it was a really neat invention. The invention basically was they're like magnetic hooks that they don't literally have hooks, but they're more like an adhesive strip that you stick on a wall, but there's a magnet on the other side. And so you put your item up, like a paper or what have you, and then you put a magnet on the other side and it holds it up. And when they asked, what was the idea? What was the, inspirational moment of when you came up with this product or idea? And she said, well, I have a 5-year-old son. He's always coming home with, all these drawings from school. And, I wanted a way for us to be able to, put up and take down, the artwork that he's bringing home to celebrate the creativity. And so for her, that was the moment, right? And from that, really came this really compelling story of how she launched her business. So really the first attention grabbing component has to start with that moment. And that moment could be something that a lot of people connect with. It could be, something that a lot of people struggle with. It could be a moment around, a connection with a problem, or, it could be this, connection of an experience that people share. But it's something about this moment, this this little glimpse into something that we all go through. So that's number one. Number two is when you start with that, you're automatically going to be able to kind of build an emotional connection with the consumers of your story, of your narrative. So being able to have that emotional connection and really dive into that emotional connection is about how people think and feel and connect with that moment. So number two is finding the emotional connection behind that moment. What is that emotion? Is it fear? Is it inspiration? Is it anxiety? Is it joy? Is it pleasure? What's the emotional connection or underlying part of that moment that we're looking at? And then number three is to really have a contextual framework for the narrative, right? So you've got this moment, you're connected through this emotion, and now you're going to shape and create a context, a contextual framework of when, where, all the elements that give it context, right? Number four, which is really important, is and this is probably one of the things that a lot of brands struggle with the most, is telling the story, but thinking about the consumer or the market, the audience that's going to see it first, thinking about it from their point of view first, right? Because when you try to tell a story, if you're trying to tell a story and you're imagining that you're telling the story because of the way that the audience is going to view it, not the way that you view it, but how they might view it, think about that first, and then let that help sort of guide the process. So number one, build on that emotional moment or on that inspirational moment. Number two, connect emotionally with the story. Number three, have context for the story. Number four, make sure you tell it from the audience point of view first. So number five, now this gets into the actual story itself. And I like to think of this as almost like a narrative arch. I mean, growing up in school, you're taught a basic fundamental of storytelling is, you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Well, I get that, but I think more, from a practical standpoint, I think you really need to understand and think about this. All of the shows that we love to watch, that we're hooked on, it starts first with the characters. That's what gets us hooked, right? Is the characters. Now the tease might be, the context or the moment or the genre, but ultimately what keeps us engaged is the characters. And so that's really the beginning, is, are you introducing characters that people can relate to? And then sort of that middle section is this challenge or this obstacle or this problem that's going to have to be tackled. And then the end is, what was the outcome? And so as you build this and you have these characters and they're going through this situation and they're facing these challenges, and then they have this outcome, you're really kind of creating that narrative arc, if you will, for them to go along with you in the journey. And then number six is to make sure that you've got some component of being culturally relevant, right? If you can set the framework in something that our culture is currently experiencing or is currently, sort of wrestling with, that's another component of that attention grabbing component of a compelling digital narrative. Because when you do this, when you sort of tie in the story, you tie in this narrative to what's happening at a cultural level, then that sort of relevancy is built in, right? So number seven is the last component, and I think this is another area where brands really miss out on, is essentially what we want to be able to do with a story, with any story, is really to have a human to human connection. And when your brand or your company is able to move out of this sort of, entity, and move into a human to human experience, that really lays out the groundwork. It lays the foundation for something that's compelling, something that will grab their attention, and something that they'll want to come back to. And I think this whole framework, it really centers around a truth that we've spoken about before on the show time and time again, and that is, when can we shift away from thinking like being a commercial and think more like being the show, the entire program, not just this interlude in between the story. So building and incorporating these 7 attention grabbing components for your digital narrative are the ways that you need to think about creating and documenting your brand story as we look to 2020. So think about that when you are, really contemplating how you're going to execute your digital marketing and your digital creative. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. My name is Michael Wynn. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of Digital Ops, a division of RB Oppenheim Associates. Have a great week. We'll see you tomorrow.